everyone. I wanted to show a project that I am currently working on. I call this my random color book. I love color. I do have a hard time with white space. I want everything all color. Lots of vivid color. I was inspired doing the journaling by fives to do some backgrounds. I love to do backgrounds. I'm a background, I love doing backgrounds. So this was kind of an experiment to see if I could do the journaling by fives with the watercolors and how I would go about doing that. It ended up not being an experiment for journaling by fives. It ended up just being, let's play with color. These are the ones that I did on cardstock. I bought 12 by 12 white cardstock, a whole pack of them, and I started coloring them. I used all kinds of things. This is the cover that I plan on using. It is watercolor paper, just so it's a little bit stiffer. These are the cardstock. I used watercolors, stamp pads, the dye ink stamp pads, and some of the permanent too. I did some embossing. What I did was I took the whole 12 by 12 paper and started putting color on it. And I was trying to come up with different ways to put color on the papers. And then I started really liking it, so I decided to make a book out of what I was doing, and I cut those 12 by 12s in half to make 6-inch book, basically. And what I decided to do was kind of leave it as the color as I was doing it, and then add one element of color to each page. I'm still working on it. It ended up not being quite enough pages for the book, so I am adding a couple more pages. I'm working on those still. So I've added some embossing, some stamps, but I kind of wanted to leave the color as it was. I like looking at color. I like looking at my backgrounds. So I think this will be one of those works in progress for quite a while, and I will just add to it when I want to add to it. I did do some stamping on some of the cardstock before I started coloring it. So that's the random numbers and letters that you see. I use stamps and foam pads and bubble wrap, watercolors and stamp pads. I did use a little bit of acrylic ink for some stamps. I didn't use it as coloring the pages. I used it more for embellishing the pages. I do like, and there's an example of what I do, I like pens that bleed when they're wet. So I had done some outlining of these circles and spritzed them with water, and you can see how they bled on the inside. It adds a little bit. These guys are done with a calligraphy pen, and it didn't spritz as well as it should have. I also used some of the sprays over some stencils. That wasn't working as well for me, and they seem to come off still, so I'm not sure how to set those. Added some tissue paper, some watercolor crayons, and I did add a little bit of the twinkling H2Os I've had for quite a while. I bought a bunch of them when I was doing the artist trading cards back in 2004. I just love those. I just love the way they make everything sparkle, twinkle. And I tried not to add too much. I think I probably will add a little bit more. I like stamping with them, and I probably will do that once I put the book together. I did emboss while it was apart because it would made it easier. And this is acrylic glitter paint. So it was just one of those fun things to do, to play with color. Seeing where it went and and what would happen if I did this and that. I had actually planned on trying to do my own journaling by fives in a different way, and then got distracted with playing with color, so I didn't get very far. But I do like the way this is turning out, and plan to add some more to it. And it inspired me to do other things as well. Let me do a quick, this was one of the experimental first ones. I decided to do some collaging on it and then add the color, but my collage pieces started falling off, so I only did one page that way. Didn't like that so well, and that's how I ended up just putting color on everything, using the stencils and stamps. I love that stencil. This is one of those fun foams that I put ink on and stamped with it. And then I love my fish. And that is acrylic glitter paint. So that is that one. And I still have to bind it and put it together. I'm going to add the other pages before I do that, though. So that led me to getting some watercolor paper and seeing how things would work on the watercolor paper. I did the same thing with the pens that bleed a little bit. I wrote circles, and when I put the other colors on top, they bled a little. I like that effect. So this is what I did with some of them. This is bubble wrap, and I put a lot of water on mine to do bubble wrap, and it soaked up that water, and it took 3 days for this to dry. So I'm going to have to come up with a better solution on doing bubble wrap with watercolor paper. I didn't do the back of that one. Oh, here's some more little experimental pieces. This is pastel stencil, which worked out pretty well. I don't usually work on watercolor paper. I don't spend money on stuff very much, so I did splurge a little bit to see how it would work. And I like the way the color really shows up. So I'm going to do some more of that. I have plans to put all these in a book by themselves, another random color book, just color to look at. And that brings me to my drop papers. I use a big craft mat for a lot of stuff. I put the ink on the mat and spritz water to it, and I can do a video on some of the stuff that I do, but I use the mat a lot, so I can't have a drop paper out. But I've always loved the way my drop papers looked. I do like to stamp off the edges of the paper, so I don't want to waste all that ink or color or paint or whatever, so I will use a little piece of paper and put it underneath there, and I clean off my stamps with these papers. If I have any extra color, I'll put them on. I had some extra embossing stuff, so I embossed it a little bit. So these are just pages that I had torn out of a glue book that I'm working on, and decided to use them for papers underneath and to clean off stamps and things, and I'm loving the way they're turning out. This one is actually crayon rubbing, just to see how that would work. It didn't turn out very dark, but it looked okay. And like I said, I'll get a stencil out, and I'll clean off my brush or whatever with the stencil, and then if I've got any, I'll do a little bit on a drop paper. So I've got quite a few of these drop papers going on at one time. When they get wet, I send them out to dry and start using another one, so this is only the tip of the iceberg. And I do plan, I think I'm going to put all these in a little book as well. Just love them. I've always loved my drop papers. This one, I had just bought a roller, a brayer with a stencil on it, and I used a little bit of metallic acrylic paint, and I just loved the effect that was, and I was using up that last little bit of paint on this piece of paper and just loved the way it turned out. So, and I do love that little foam rubber to use as a stencil or stamp, whatever. Just love it. Use it all the time. This was an experiment with the triangle stencil that I just got. It's also done with the ink that bleeds a little bit, and then H2Os and other things are on top. And here's some bubble wrap left over. Some acrylic paint left over. And I had gotten some spray, and don't know how I dribbled that on there. But that's going to be my random color book. So, thanks for watching.